Welcome to Model Kit Stuff, where you'll find all of this. Thanks. So I'm working on the tail section, which is 3 glazed parts. I've cleaned up the parts for the very end where the guns come out, and they're all dry fitted and they fit lovely. And I'm just in the process of cleaning up the parts, and on this one there looks like a seat in there and there's a big ejector pin mark, so I'm just going in with a narrow sanding stick and sanding that away, because you know the height's not going to be massively important. What's important is we don't see the ejector pin mark. So there we go, that's that done. So that looks a lot better. Now the instructions are telling me that we have to paint this surface and the inner surface there 110, which is sort of that material colour we've used in the cockpit. So 110 is natural wood. Sorry. So what I'm not sure of though is whether we're actually going to see this, because that part is going to go in the tail. It sort of clips in there like so, and then we see a bit of it through the glass turret, but the windows are tiny, so I'm not sure you're actually going to see it. We'll take a view, but it's going to be in there, and you've got tiny windows on this thing, so I don't think I'm going to bother at this stage. When we come to test fit it, what we'll do is we'll paint it black, then we'll come to test fit it, and if it looks like it's visible, we can do something there. There's nothing about what colour to do that seat though. But again, these are the windows we're going to be looking through, and they're absolutely tiny. So I suspect once that's put together that ain't going to be visible particularly. I suppose there's a possibility. We might do it. Right, let's just get these. So we're working on clear parts now, and you have to be careful with those. So my start point is a 600 grit to get these off. Now we're not doing any sanding on anything that's going to be glazed, but the plastic behaves differently. It's harder and it's more brittle. So that's my 2 nubs out. We just need to square this location tab off. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I want this to be totally smooth, so we're going to just drop down the grits. So we're just on 600, we're going to do 800 and go in a different direction. Just needs a few swipes. There we go, we don't need to worry about the tab. Then we'll go to 1000. Again, going in the opposite direction to the last time. Then we'll go 2000. And what happens is the abrased area widens because you're sort of feathering it in. Right, now we're going to go 3000. And you'll also notice it's starting to get less foggy. Now we're going to go 5000. And you know, it feels smooth to the touch now. And then I'm going 7000. And then finally, with my polishing sponge here, which is a 4000, I'm just going to rub over it. And that, because it's a sponge, conforms to the shapes a little bit better. And there you go. That is as clear almost as this one that's not been done. Now if this was a canopy or something like that, what we'd do is we'd use some polishing compound just to finish that up. And I've got some special polishing sponges from Tamiya, but I've not got any of their polishing compound at the moment, so I would have shown you that otherwise, but this part gets painted anyway, so it's not important. But I need to do it again on this one, so I'll do that off camera. We have some painting to do now, and it's telling us in the instructions that it needs to be 56 on the inside, which is aluminium of course, and then obviously 56 on the outside, which is the colour of the aircraft. But what we're going to do is we're going to paint black first on the inside. That'll just help with the look of the aluminium on the inside. So gonna chuck some black down. I've got everything mounted, ready for painting. When it comes to the guns, we only really need to worry about the back end of the guns. We don't need to worry about the barrels so much. We'll paint those in after we've painted the fuselage. So yeah, we're just going to paint them down with any old black. I'm happening to use a semi-gloss black X18 for those of you that like them Tamiya paints, and we're just using this because I'm using my Tamiya paints up where I can, to be honest. So it's not because this is the best product for this particular job or anything like that. So simply gonna give it a whiz up, put some in a palette and put some paint down. So again, I'm gonna do that off camera. Okay, paint's dried, the black paint, so we can go in now. I'm using ICM's 1023 aluminium for the interior. So just give it a really good shake. I do really like working with these paints. I do have to admit that these are really nice paints. But, if you've been following the channel for a while, you know I reviewed them all, and you know that I'm a bit of a fan of the ICM paints. They go down really well, they thin really well, they look great when they've dried. They work brilliantly with brush and brilliantly with airbrush. So yeah, and I thin them with water. So all we're going to do is put a brush load of water in, mix it. There you go. And that's probably about right. So what we have to do is try and carefully paint round the windows on the inside. There's no, unlike the outside where they're recessed, so you've got a sort of a guide. You can't do that on the inside because it's just totally smooth. So we just have to paint very carefully around those sections. I'm expecting to need to put 2 coats of the aluminium down. We could airbrush this, we could use the masks that we've got for the outside and put them on the inside. It would be doable, but I was a bit concerned that we might lose the adhesive for when we need them on the outside. So we're just going to do it by hand. So just as before, for the wood on this little part here, I'm using light wood with a hint of khaki just to give it a sort of orangey look. I've not thinned that actually, but I think we'll get away with it. So my aluminium's taken 3 coats in the end. Got some surface tension there, so we'll just give that, let that break up by rubbing it with the brush. There we go, so that's our first coat. There we go, so that's the last bit of painting work we need to do, so just give that a moment and then we'll give it a second coat. So whilst the paint is drying on all of our tail parts, I need it to leave for a few hours before I try and assemble it. We can now start looking at some of this. So this is the front turret, and because we've got this that goes on, I'm guessing I'm going to have to assemble this before we paint as well. And we also need to look at that turret as well. This part here we can get away with, I think. I don't think it's going to be an issue. We can put the guns in to plug the hole. So we're going to have a look at all of this now. So yeah, can't remember why I've put an asterisk against that. Must mean something, but I can't tell you what that is. So let's clean up all these parts and work through all of that. Okay, all of my parts are cleaned up now for all these various sections. And there's paint instructions for all of these internal parts. So we're going to paint them next. What's bothering me is the door though, because they're suggesting you don't need to paint that. But when I look through the hole here, in this, bearing in mind this is going to be a big clear part at the end of it, I can see light where the door is, and I can put my finger over it and see my finger. So I think we can definitely gonna see the inside of that door, and that's a problem because we don't want to see, if we leave it unpainted, what we're going to see is the primer, and we don't want to see that because the primer will be black and that'll stand out. So I think we're going to paint the inside of the door aluminium to fit in with the rest of the fuselage. So everything here needs a little bit of paint. So now my internal parts have dried, so I think we can assemble that and look at installing that and see what the fit's like. So I built this in the wrong order, and I've glued that on. I thought I was filming, but I didn't have the camera on. So I've glued that on and then realised I hadn't put the guns in. But you can get in from the back here and put the little part in, which is this part here. And then the guns slot in. You can do that from the back, so wasn't a problem in the end. So that's in nice and straight. So what I'm interested in now is I've got this part to put in. So I've got to make sure I orientate this properly. In the instructions they have this upside down, which is throwing me off a little bit. That goes in like so and stops in there. Right, and there's a little stop for it. So it's a bit fiddly to do on camera, so I'm going to do it off camera. So we are ready to fit this at the back of this aircraft now. So we're going to go in at an angle so that these slot into place, then twist it round and push her in, and fit seems okay, but actually the parts seem a little undersized. There's a step, definite step between the fuselage and the clear parts all the way around. Okay, interesting, not something I was expecting. You can see the step there though, all the way around. Okay, well that's creating a bit of work, isn't it? Right, but we can glue that in now. Once you've put those masks on, it's easier to paint the inside surface as well. So what I've done is I've put the masks on and then I've hand painted, and that way I've been able to go round the masks on the inside. Now, in some instances we've put primer on and painted. In this instance I've used enamel paints, and so I've not even needed to put a primer down, and they'll get more solid when we put black primer on the other side. So yeah, that's all good. So they're ready to go. Now this part here, this is the nose piece. There is, you can see the masking. There is, when you look at photographs, a sort of a yellowy colour where these, where the transparent parts are sort of overlapping and fastened together. It goes a sort of a yellow colour. I guess there's trapped moisture or something in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint over it with no primer or anything, a sort of pale sandy colour, quite thin, to try and emulate that, and then when that's dry we'll put some more masking over all of this. So on these curved parts, masking fluid is a good way to go, and that's what I'm probably going to do. We've masked all the other clear areas, although I've got a problem with this one, keeps popping up. It's actually slightly oversized for it, so I think we're going to take it off and just use masking fluid for that one. The back area has been masked like so, and you can see the primer on the inside of that where we painted it in. So yeah, we're almost there. Once I've got these last few parts in, we can start then doing the filling. Now I do have a little bit of touch up to do. I knocked off a little bit of paint on the corner of here, and I've rubbed paint off the top of the seat, so I've got a little bit of touch up to do before we can build that up. We have to be careful because we've got the guns in place, but what we'll be doing is paint, we'll just if we get paint on the guns, we're not going to worry about it because we'll paint them in pretty much last job. I'm taking that off because it's just annoying me. So there we go. So yeah, we've got some filling to do, and a little bit of sanding because we've not cleaned up the wings or anything like that. We'll do it all in one, have a methodical process where we work from back to front or something like that, get it all right. And then what we're going to do is we're going to prime some of the areas white where we've got yellow or green going down, painting those areas, put our paint masks on, and then paint the whole thing, prime the whole thing black, and then start doing the tinkering about with the silver, to the aluminium. I do want to try and get some different shades on some of the panels, so what we might do is put some grey down on some panels before we paint the aluminium on. Don't know yet. We're gonna do a little bit of messing around with that. So progressing nicely. I've got the back end of these guns to paint up, and the touch up to do, and then we can start putting that last bit of glazing in. Right, let's have a look at the fit. So yeah, interesting. I thought we might have some fit issues because of the gap, but no. And we managed to get this together okay, so yeah. Right, we can glue that in then. We're not going to be touching these parts, so I can literally paint them without primer and then install the part while the paint's drying. Just bear in mind you still need a good finish because these are right near the windows, so they're going to be very, very visible. So I'm going with a khaki brown for this area here, which I've thinned down with a little bit of water, and I'm just going to give it a coat and see what happens. It will be retained by the edges of the two masking parts there, which sort of keep it in the middle. So I just need to flood it with paint and let it dry off, but I need it to stay sort of translucent. There is some surface tension which I need to break. There we go. So perhaps get an idea of what that looks like from that side. Yeah, I think that's going to look okay. So we'll let that dry, and then we'll mask over that area before we put the masking fluid down. Right then, time to get this installed. So it sits there quite nicely, so let's get some adhesive in there. So that should do the job. So what we're going to do with the canopy, you could go with canopy glue with this front clear part. You could go with canopy glue or any form of clear drying non-gassing glue like PVA or MIG Ultra glue or something like that. But what we're going to do is we're going to paint our contact area with glue with our liquid poly. Just let that sit for a moment, and then I'm going to put a second coat on. If you've been following my channel for a while, you know that this is a trick I do quite a bit. So that second layer of glue will sit on the surface much longer without flashing off than the first. So we've basically got a sticky surface there. So we're not putting glue in the gap and letting it capillary in. We're going to place the part on, and it should hold and bond with no risk of getting any gassing or any issues like that. There you go. Nice and clear. All good. That's everything pretty much on except for this little antenna that goes on the front, and I don't want to put that in just yet because it's a little bit in the way of tidying up the seam there. So once we've tidied that up, we'll mount that on before we paint. But otherwise, that's everything else on before we paint the fuselage. So we've still got engines to do, we've still got landing gear and wheels to do, but everything else is pretty much brought together. So it's filling and tidying up. Now, because we're going to be painting this in metallics, it's going to show up every single issue. I use metallics for gap finding on my model ships because all those speckles of metallic material bounce light, and that's great for finding gaps, but it's not great if you're trying to hide gaps. So we need to make sure that everything is nicely buttoned up, smooth and gap free. So let's have a go at some gap filling first, and depending on how well we think we've done, we'll look at what options we're going to do for priming thereafter. Right then, I have got my fuselage together. Just as a recap, got some gaps that we need to fill, and I also think we've got some panel lines to sort out. Some of them need a little bit of scoring and so on and so forth. I'm a little bit disappointed with some of these Montex masks. I've not had this issue before, but on the curves they seem to be losing their adhesion, so that's a little bit annoying. So I don't know whether that's common or just something that's happening this time, but I'm going to have to make my own masks for the bull turret on the top, which is a shame. But right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish masking these two clear parts at the end, and we're going to use some Maskell for that. So if you've never used a masking fluid, to be honest, I've only ever used Maskell. There's several brands about, but I'm going to show you how I go about it. Sometimes you get little masking in the masking set, sort of a start position that gives you a mask that goes around the periphery, and that was the case for this, but it kept coming off. So what we're going to do is we're going to get in there and just cover this surface with Maskell. It's quite a simple, easy way of working. Sometimes you get some dried stringy stuff, and I'm just going to get rid of that. There we go. Then I don't want anything getting in the way of the liquid. I haven't used this for a fair amount of time, so that's probably why we've got this problem. But you can see it's easy to gather it up and get rid of it. And there we go. Right, so there we go. We're putting on some of the Maskell. I'm using a toothpick because I find that generally the easiest way of doing it. I used to do it with a brush, but I found I used to use my old brushes for it, but I got to a point where I didn't have enough old brushes left. So I've started using this, and I actually prefer it to using a paintbrush now. So we just put it on, work it up to where we want, and actually when it's dry you can trim it with a knife if you're very careful. You can pull it away with the knife as well, so you have to sort of go on and slice a bit off rather than drag your knife, but it is doable. It's a little bit far away from me, just so I can keep it in camera, but you can see how easy it is. You're just dolloping a bit on. You do, whilst it's out in the air, you do start to get some lumpy bits, so what I do is just wipe it off occasionally, because once it starts drying, it starts stretching and grabbing and all sorts of stuff that you don't want to do. Let's just flip this over, and then I can do the underneath. Now I can go over the masking that we've already put on, and that won't be a problem. And you see how that's starting to grab at the bottom there. I'll take that off. You'll know when it's starting to thicken up because it starts to go stringy. I've not used anyone else's masking product, so I don't know how this compares to other people's. I've only ever used Maskell, and I don't use it enough that I run out of it very often. So I used Maskell as a teenager, and I've just carried on using it. I think this is probably only my second bottle anyway. So what I do, where I'm not sure that I've gone all the way down, I just put a dab on and make sure it's covered. So it doesn't have to look pretty, it just has to function well. There we go. I'm going to carry on getting this done, and then I'll come back to you when we start filling. So I'm going to try and save myself a little bit of time here with these masks that aren't sticking particularly well. And I'm going to put them, peel them off, put them on the masking tape that I intend to use, and cut around them is my idea. I think that'll save me some time rather than putting the tape over the glazing and then having to cut them out. Not helpful when they fall apart on you a little bit. Let's see if we can repair that. Yeah, pretty much. So I've just sharpened my number 11 blade here. So I'm hoping that I can go round in one pass. So let's have a go and see if we can do this. Sorry it's not central on the camera. So we know, because I've already fitted them, that these masks fit really, really well. So I'm hoping if we just cut them out, then I've saved myself a huge amount of time. So we'll do one, see how we get on. So hopefully that will just go into place. So let's put it on and have a go. Yeah, that's working all right. Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. Right, I'm going to carry on and get that done off camera. You know what I'm doing now. And then we'll have a look at filling next. Okay, some gaps to fill, and I want to start by using some plastic card. I always keep my offcuts from when I'm doing
any scratch building, because they come in really handy for all sorts of things. You never know when you need a little bit of card, but it also is great for gap filling, so I can put that in the gap, glue it in, and it's much quicker and a lot less messy than trying to fill it and then sand it back. I mean, we've still got to do the sanding part, but yeah, it's going to just save me some time, and with straight gaps like this it can be really efficient. So I'm just going to cut slightly longer than we need, so I'm just going to cut a little corner off there. You do have to be mindful of what's going to be seen on the other side. So there you go, I've put a little bit of card in. You can see that there. And we're just going to glue that in. And we'll leave it for a minute or two, it'll dry really quickly. Snip it back with our scissors and then just some final sand. So wherever we've got a gap like that, that's my first way of attacking it. Now these here, we've got a bit of a lip, so I want to sand that back first anyway and then see what needs filling. It's the same with this all along this edge here. We do have some gaps in the wing roots, and we can possibly apply the same. You just have to find some card that's thin enough. And I've got all sorts of different thicknesses in here. There you go, see, that'll go in nicely. So if we cut a little strip of that, and we push it down into the gap and then wedge it forward as far as it'll go. And then we know we've filled the gap as best we can. There we go, so that's as far forward as it'll go. And we push it down into the wing. That's not going to get seen anyway, so that's fine. And we can glue it in. And that means that we'll have a lot less filler to put in, makes a lot less mess. So I'm going to carry on filling my gaps with white card, and then I'll come back to you. So I'm going to start at the back of the aircraft, sanding, scribing, filling as we go, and that way we know that we've methodically gone through it all and not missed anything. For filling, I've got a couple of different fillers that I'm likely to use. Perfect Plastic Putty, which I find is a great all-round filler. It's my favourite of the flexible fillers. And then we've got this Vallejo plastic putty. You can actually get it in two different formats now, which is great for filling hairline gaps and that sort of stuff. And of course we've already done the white plastic card large gap filling. For scribing and for putting panel lines back in after sanding, I'm using this razor saw. These little points here are great for scribing. I find them really useful, and they're so much thinner than scribers that I actually prefer to use this. So that's my plan. For sanding, along with my range of Infini sanders that I will use in some areas, I'm also using a Flexifile ribbon system, which is great for sanding curves. I've got lots of different grits, so yeah, it's really great for all these sort of curve jobs on the fuselage, and that's actually where we're going to start. So I'm going to start with my just getting this nice and smooth and getting some of the sanding marks out of there. When you can see a white line, you know you've got sanding material in there. So it's always worth just checking with your finger whether you can feel that it's smooth or not. And that's not quite. So what I'm going to do, I don't want to go any coarser than the medium that I've got in for now. I just want to just blend it all in. And then we can drop it down to a finer grit, and then ultimately we can polish it up. So I'm just going to change the ribbon. Nice and easy and quick. There we go, and then we'll just give it a final polish with a smooth ribbon. And that feels smooth enough now. Actually, that feels really quite good. So we've got a panel line there that we've lost. So I'm just going to put that back in. There we go, and then once you've got it in, you can deepen it if you feel you need. So that should look good. And if you think you've got it a bit scruffy and you've got, you can just fill it and redo it, but that one's good. Okay. So I've got some sanding to do here. So I'm going to do the same process with my flexi file and just sand that down, and then I can see I've got gaps in the wing root there which we can fill. So I'm going to sand this down, put the panel lines back in, and then I'll come back to you when we're filling. Okay, so we've got tiny little joint gap there that we need to just fill. So I'm just going to use some of this Vallejo putty on that. So we're just going to put it in the general area, and then we're going to go over it and push it down into the joint. There we go, and it looks really messy when you've first done it, but this is such a good putty, I promise you. So what we're going to do now is simply go in with a little bit of tissue paper and wipe the excess away, or in this case put more on. There we go. And where we've got it in the panel lines and we filled the panel lines, I'm just going to go in with the tip of my knife and work that out. There you go, that's it, it's done. It couldn't be quicker, and very, very little cleanup needed. Right, let's have a look at this top line. Now this top line is a bit messier. We've got the white plastic card in there that we need to sand back. So I'm going to put Again, this Vallejo putty in, or am I? I don't have any lip, so it should be okay. So we'll do the sanding first and then put the putty in afterwards when we've got it all smooth. There we go, that's the plastic card. So I just need to make sure that's nice and level with the fuselage. There we go, and then we can sand that smooth. So after sanding this back, we still have one or two little gaps. We can see that anything that's not white is a bit of a gap. So that we can simply hairline gaps, the tiny little undulations. And again, our Vallejo filler will do a really good job of this. So I can just run that down the full length there. But you can see how perfect our plastic card worked, and it was the quickest way of filling it as well. So all good there. There we go, so that will be nice and even, and I can feel under my finger that that's good. So the only thing remaining is to put our panel lines back in. So finding an existing line and then just following it like so. Now some of these lines don't go all the way around, so be mindful of that. Okay, that is restored and ready for priming. So here we've got a gap that is very shallow and also quite wide, so it's not very good for the Vallejo, which needs a deep, thin gap. So we're going to use our perfect putty on this. So you can see I'm using an old knife blade just as a spreader. Gives me a little bit more precision and control. And the back edge of it allows me to scrape it away and make sure I've got it nice and flat. There we go. So I've done the full length, so we can blend everything in as we go. Sometimes you get a rounding off of the joining pieces, so you've got a little bit of plastic that's sort of on a curve going in, and we can sort that at the same time. Because this is going to dry hard and it's sandable, this main area that we're trying to fill, I'm just going to build it up proud, and then we'll sand it back when it's dry. So I'm going to carry on cleaning up, trimming back, filling in, and I'll come back to you in a bit. Okay, our filler is all dried. We've finished that process. What I want to do now is put the white primer down for the yellow paint area. So out of shot, I've got my paint instructions to hand, so I can remind myself of what I am painting. There is some elements of the yellow we're not going to do, which is the front end of the engine cowlings. We'll do that later on, but we want to be able to capture not just where the yellow is, but where the national insignia is, and also where we've got the green on the engines as well, on the engine nacelles. So we can paint all that in before we put the black primer down and the aluminium. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to blow out any dust off with my airbrush. I'm using my Evolution, which has a 0.4 needle in. Just making sure we've got no dust knocking about. It's also a good test of your masking. So our primer is the MIG 2352 A-stand lacquer primer, which is white primer with microfiller. I haven't used this before, and it says that you just need to give it a good shake. Shake the product thoroughly before use. Clean the surfaces before applying. Allow at least 30 minutes to dry. Dries completely in 24 hours. Gentle polishing with micromesh cloths will perfect the finish. Clean with airbrush cleaner MIG 213. Well, we've got the airbrush cleaner, so we should be all right. So it has a ball in it, so we can really properly agitate it. I'm going to shake this for a minute or two, and then we'll get some in the airbrush and see how we go. So this will be interesting to see, because white primers are traditionally the hardest to lay down. The pigment tends to be a bit coarser and a bit rougher than other colours. It's the same with paints, actually, white paints. So I'm really interested to see how well this goes down. Just get myself some cleaning materials. Right, let's just decant a little bit into our airbrush. And as always, I'm going to start by just checking everything's working okay on my card. I'm also going to take my needle cap off. That seems to be going down okay. So I'm going to start with this tail section here. Well, that's going down lovely. Yeah, really impressed with that. Very nice. Getting a small amount of tip dry, but nothing major. Yeah, that's going down really nice. I'm impressed with that. Okay, right, so that is the underneath tail section done. Then also underneath we've got the green stripes, which are sort of from there to there, so we'll do that as well. That's gone down well, although I can now see a hair. Okay, I'm going to mask up now and I'll come back to you when we're done. Please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't done so. It's free, and that way you won't miss my first impressions, my tool reviews, my product reviews, and any of my builds, including wooden model kits as well as plastic. It's all free, and if you'd like to support the channel, you can hit my PayPal link in the text below. Every pound goes straight into the channel to keep the cameras rolling and to do more fun stuff for you to watch.